Hello, everyone, and welcome to this webcast on Project Career, promoting cognitive support technology use, academic success, and competitive employment outcomes for post-secondary students with traumatic brain injuries. It's a lovely morning here in Richmond, Virginia, and at Virginia Commonwealth University, and I'm delighted to be here with you this morning. I'm Phil Rumrill. I'm a professor of rehabilitation counseling and director of the Center for Disability Studies at Kent State University in Ohio. Glad to be here with you today. I want to thank the folks at Virginia Commonwealth University, the Rehabilitation Research and Training Center, and the Center on Transition Innovations for the opportunity to be here and conduct this webcast. This Project Career, is funded by a grant from the National Institute on Disability, Independent Living, and Rehabilitation Research. And this webcast is co-sponsored by the Kent State University Center for Disability Studies and the VCU Center on Transition Innovations. So we're glad to be here today and talk with you about our project, and more on that in just a minute. Our project is a 5-year development project, as I mentioned, funded by the Department of Health and Human Services, Administration on Community Living, National Institute on Disability, Independent Living, and Rehabilitation Research. And the slides will bear this as well, the web page that accompanies this, this webcast. As I mentioned, it's a 5-year project. And our partners, I'm pleased to introduce our team of partners, and we'll talk more about how each partnering agency and organization works in tandem with this overall project. But I'm pleased to introduce our partners. Kent State is the contract holder for this grant, and at Kent State University site we have myself, who's the principal investigator of the project, Deborah Minton, who's one of our technology and employment coordinators. At the Boston University site we have Dr. Karen Jacobs, who is the site manager, and Ms. Amanda Nardone, who is the technology and employment coordinator from Boston University. At West Virginia University and the Job Accommodation Network, Dr. DJ Hendricks, the site manager, and technology and employment coordinator, Ms. Elaine Sampson. JBS International out of Maryland works with us on data analysis, reporting, and dissemination, and that's Ms. Eileen Elias, site manager, and data analysis specialist, Anna Leopold. We have several consultants who have helped us immeasurably in developing and implementing this project. Dr. Brian McMahon, VCU's own, Dr. Marcia Shearer from the University of Rochester, Dr. Rick Ressler from Fayetteville, Arkansas, University Professor Emeritus at the University of Arkansas, and Mr. John Pullman of Cleveland, Ohio. So that's our team, and what we would like to accomplish this morning is I'll begin with a brief overview of the traumatic brain injury epidemic in America, and it really is one. I want to talk with you about the impact that traumatic brain injury, or TBI, has on people's higher education, training, and vocational pursuits. Share with you a description of our Project Career Intervention, how it came about, the things that we do with our cognitive support technology platform to help people compensate for their cognitive limitations, and then share with you characteristics of the 124 students who have participated in our project to date, and then talk about some of the interim findings that we have observed that allow us to make inferences about the impact of Project Career on students' academic success, psychological well-being and quality of life, and also career preparedness, as many of them change their careers and seek new training and new opportunities following their TBIs. So that's what we hope to do this morning. So what is Project Career? Well, as I mentioned, this is a 5-year development project funded by the National Institute on Disability, Independent Living, and Rehabilitation Research. It's an interprofessional project where our team is made up of interdisciplinary professionals in fields such as evaluation and measurement, occupational therapy, rehabilitation counseling, rehabilitation psychology. And our focus in the project is to um, provide services to a total of 150 college students from 2 and 4-year undergraduate institutions over the course of the 5-year project. We are now just ending year 4, and we have 124 students who have participated so far, and we'll talk about them more in just a bit in terms of their demographic characteristics and their experiences with our project. So we're on track to meet our target of 150 students. We added 30 students per year, roughly, to the project. Students receive services from one of 3 implementation sites, Kent State University, Boston University, and West Virginia University. At each of those sites, we have a technology and employment coordinator who manages both the matching person and technology assessment, as well as the individualized vocational case management component of the project, and more on that as we proceed through our time together this morning. We focus the intervention on students who live in and around those 3 university implementation sites. They do not need to be students at those universities. So at the Boston University site, for example, we have some students from Boston University who are coping with brain injuries, but also students from many other colleges and universities in and around the greater Boston area. And the same is true for our site in West Virginia, as well as Kent State University. So the intervention is housed at 3 universities, but we've had students from, I believe, about 35 different colleges and universities at the 3 sites. JBS International helps us with the data analysis portion of the program in developing the cognitive support technology component as well, and then in reporting and disseminating project materials. And that contract with JBS International is headed up by Eileen Elias and Anna Leopold, as I had mentioned earlier. We talked about our consultants, and they're instrumentally involved in helping us to develop, implement, and disseminate results of this project. We also rely heavily on a wonderful national advisory board made up of leaders in research, service delivery, and advocacy in the brain injury field. And we're very glad to have their input and expertise. We convene twice annually via teleconference, and our advisory board has guided us really every step of the way through these first 4 years of our project. I had mentioned also that we have 124 students. About a third of them are military veterans, and about 2/3 are civilians. So in this project, we sought to serve both our veterans coming back from the Iraq and Afghanistan military theaters who are pursuing post-secondary education as they attempt to reconstruct and often change their career paths, and the same is true for other civilian students as well. So we include both veterans and students, civilian students, and we recruit heavily from veteran affairs and veteran services offices at colleges and universities throughout our 3 implementation areas, as well as from student disability services offices on college and university campuses, state vocational rehabilitation field counselors, and the United States Veterans Administration. So that's mostly where our recruitment comes from. So that's just an overview of what Project Career is. We'll talk more specifically about it, but really the impetus for this project lies in the traumatic brain injury epidemic that is facing our country. And just wanted to share with you some things we've learned about traumatic brain injury to give you an idea of the scope of the problem and the kinds of things that need to be done to address the needs of folks who are dealing with brain injuries. Brain injury is a major public health issue facing us in the United States. It's gotten a lot of attention recently with our veterans coming back with these blast and concussion injuries from Iraq and Afghanistan wars. Also, the increased incidence of brain injury related to sports and recreational endeavors, particularly contact sports like football. We know that about 1.7 million Americans sustain brain injuries annually. Um, uh, 52,000 people die as a result of brain injuries, which makes TBI the leading cause of death and lifelong disability among all Americans under the age of 45. We know also that as many as 500,000 people who sustain brain injuries each year receive no medical treatment for their injuries. So we've got a big problem making sure, particularly in the acute and post-acute phases of treatment and recovery, that people are accessing the healthcare services that they need so they can recover maximally from these injuries. But almost a third of all brain injuries go untreated. And that's a big problem that we as a society all share in, and we need to find better ways to connect people to the resources that can help them as they literally and figuratively get back on their feet following injuries. Um, we know there's been a 50% increase since 2001 in traumatic brain injuries, particularly what we euphemistically call mild TBI, which also known as concussions, among people under the age of 18 due to sports and recreation injuries. So we see a growing proportion of brain injuries occurring with children as a result of sports and recreation. We also note that as many as 10 to 20% of our returning soldiers from the Iraq and Afghanistan theaters are experiencing brain injuries, and these blast injuries really do neurologically look very different than other injuries that are sustained from other sources. So we not only have the neurological differences in those blast injuries, we also have the fact of trauma associated with the onset of the injury, and then people coming back and trying to reintegrate into civilian life and articulating their military training into the civilian labor market, requiring accommodations and sometimes having to transfer those skills and figuring out how the skills they learned in the military transfer with the newfound limitations associated with their injuries. So it's quite a complex proposition for sure. We know that no two brain injuries are alike. They could look the same on a neurological scan, but they can affect people differently. A brain injury, unlike many other disabling conditions, can affect literally every aspect of personal and social functioning. So the multisystemic nature of brain injury makes it an exceedingly difficult condition to preliminarily cope with and ultimately adjust to. And pursuits such as higher education and employment after brain injury are exceedingly difficult because of the cognitive demands of additional training, as well as the increasing cognitive demands of the modern American workplace when you have a condition that affects your cognitive functioning. And we see cognitive impairment as one of the primary effects of brain injury, and it's really where we focus most of this project that we're implementing now, looking at cognitive support technology in the form of iPads and customized configuration of applications that address each student's specific cognitive limitations, but within the context of the specific degree programs that they are in, and also embedded within the context of the career choices that they're making and those fields of endeavor that they are entering or re-entering following their injuries. In preparing the intervention for Project Career, we examined what the specific issues are that are facing students with traumatic brain injuries in college as they attempt post-secondary education. So you have a condition that creates limitations with your cognitive capabilities and changes them, and yet you're entering a cognitively intensive environment like post-secondary education. So it only stands to reason that there would be some difficulties there, but in putting the intervention together, we really had no idea about the extent and scope of the challenges that students with TBI face as they attempt to pursue higher education. We'll talk about that for just a moment. We know, and it isn't just the cognitive limitations, it's also the physical effects of brain injury, mobility issues, and ongoing healthcare considerations, as well as the affective and emotional responses to brain injury, sometimes due to organic changes in the brain, and sometimes due to the adjustmental challenge associated with having a condition that quite dramatically changes your life. And we see students with TBI having those difficulties as well. So it's issues they have with study skills. It's issues they have with sometimes with socialization on campus, managing their medical and psychosocial rehabilitation along with their academic pursuits. It's a challenge figuring out how, for many students with TBI, how their newfound abilities and limitations articulate to a degree program, and how that degree program then articulates to a new career. For military veterans with TBI coming back and seeking additional training, you have the added complexity of transferability from the military occupation that they held while they were in the service to the civilian labor market. So if you're a munitions expert 4 in the Army and you come back and attempt employment following a brain injury in the civilian labor market, there may be no job that transfers to that particular occupation. So the issue of transition into college and then out into career becomes perhaps even more complicated for our veterans. So we've taken that into account in developing the cognitive support technology aspect of our project, but also the individualized case management process. We know that students with TBI in college compared to students without disabilities report lower grades, significantly higher dropout rates. In fact, they're about twice as likely to drop out of college prior to completing their degrees as non-disabled students are. Students with TBI are 1/3 as likely to ever set foot into a career services office at their college or university, and they're 1/4 as likely to work part-time in their chosen fields while they're in college as compared to students without disabilities. So in terms of accessing resources, in terms of helping people persist in their academic programs and succeed in their classes, as well as access career preparatory resources, we realized that there were a lot of challenges in terms of getting students with TBI hooked in. And one of the issues that we find that students with TBI in college, 80% of them report difficulties meeting the academic standards of their courses. 80%, that's very significant. Only about half of students with TBI use student disability services at their colleges and universities. And only about 20% of them report that they're satisfied with their knowledge of supports in the community that can help them in terms of independent living, in terms of healthcare, and in terms of employment acquisition after graduation. So a lot of issues that students are dealing with, and one of the ways that we've learned that students with and without disabilities can help to overcome issues related to academic performance is through technology. We also find students with TBI in general reporting a lack of comfort and proficiency with general use technology, with grammar checking, spell checking programs, with technology that might assist them, organizational software and apps and things of that nature that might help them in their studies. So we found that students' access to technology, as well as the limited access to technology, as well as the cognitive limitations attendant to their TBIs, were creating significant problems in academic performance, resulting in higher dropout rates from colleges and universities, and therefore restricting both community living and employment outcomes following their studies. So that's the sort of problem as folks make the transition into higher education and then out of higher education into their careers that we're seeking to address most directly in Project Career. And in terms of the specific aspects of technology, the process of choosing technology that can help with academic pursuits and career preparation can be very complex for a student with a traumatic brain injury. The sheer array of potential devices and the cognitive facility that would be required to access and utilize some of those devices can be very difficult for students who are experiencing cognitive limitations as a result of TBI. The rate at which people learn new information and process information that they already know can be affected by TBI, and that can also be affected by their ability to learn and develop proficiency with new technologies. The changing nature of technology and planned obsolescence and the rapidly changing issues in technology like miniaturization and things of that nature. You always have to keep up with the newest and latest devices. Can create some difficulties for folks with TBI who have difficulty organizing with executive functioning kinds of issues, as well as short, intermediate, and long-term memory. Access to technology and the financing for it, who's going to pay for it, those are issues as well. And knowing where those resources are around assistive technology, that is technology to help people with disabilities overcome limitations. So a person prior to injury may have been conversant with general use technology, such as smartphones and tablet computers and things of that nature, but not knowing how to use those same resources to assist in compensating for cognitive limitations becomes an issue. So the specific application of technology to address disability-related limitations is a totally new enterprise for people who acquire TBIs, and we have to pay close attention to that as well as we develop interventions. Not knowing the resources that exist and where and how those can and who can pay for technology that's needed, and resources are not just around technology, but not knowing how to access state vocational rehabilitation services. Are they signed up for vocational services from the Veterans Administration? So accessing those resources in the community proves to be another challenge that makes it difficult. And some of those resources are those that could help to arrange technology solutions that could help to overcome cognitive limitations. So we see that process of choosing and acquiring technology as being complex for many students with TBI. We attempt to address those issues as well. We talked about the impact of TBI on higher education and the issues that students with TBI face, both in absolute terms and in comparison to their peers without disabilities. But TBI also has a profound impact on labor force participation and employment productivity. And this was the other part of the intervention for Project Career that we seek to address through this process. One study showed a 62% employment rate at the time of injury and a 31% employment rate 1 year later. So the rate of labor force participation literally was cut in half following TBI. We also know that about 75% of people with TBI who do return to work following injury lose their jobs within 90 days if they're not provided with adequate workplace supports, including reasonable accommodations and access to cognitive support technology. So following injury, it's very difficult for people to regain access to the workforce. We know this from experience and research. And it's also very difficult once someone is placed on the job to maintain employment and to stay vigilant with regard to needed accommodations, communication with employer, disclosure of disability, all of those issues. So managing the world of work as a worker with a disability, and more specifically as a worker with a traumatic brain injury, can be exceedingly complex propositions as well, and thereby leading to a far too low rate of labor force participation. We've done some studies looking at the Rehabilitation Services Administration's 9/11 data set, which is the federal repository of information for all state vocational rehabilitation consumers throughout the United States. And we've noted a number of interesting findings there, supports and characteristics of the vocational rehabilitation consumer with TBI that seem to lead to and promote employment outcomes. We know that the better educated a client is, the more likely he or she is to be employed. So therefore, tuition assistance from the state voc rehab program, any support related to additional training is an excellent investment in future employment potential. So we see that as one quality, the greater degree of education that someone acquires, even after brain injury, increases his or her prospects for competitive employment afterwards. We also know that the people with TBI who are receiving VR services who do not receive Social Security disability benefits, either supplemental security income or Social Security disability insurance, are significantly more likely to be employed than those who enter the VR program while receiving those benefits. So if we're working with a person with TBI who's receiving disability benefits, which are predicated on the fact that the person is too disabled to work, we have more ground to go in helping him or her to reorient his or her career, and looking at work incentives within the Social Security Administration's disability programs, and figuring out ways to overcome the fact that disability benefits sometimes preclude people from seeking employment. They've taken themselves out of the labor force, so they have to then re-enter it motivationally in terms of their internal construction of their role as worker. That changes when you receive disability benefits, so we have to work through that and look at the implications of working to someone's disability benefits. We know that certain vocational rehabilitation services have a stronger relationship to competitive employment outcomes than others. And as you can see from this slide, following the web page here, you see that job development and placement services, on-the-job support, any kind of training services and supports, employment maintenance services, anything about training and employment acquisition, as well as job retention and on-the-job supports that help with issues like workplace accommodations and technology in the workplace make someone much more likely to emerge from the state vocational rehabilitation program in competitive employment than people who receive other services. So these comparisons that you see on the webpage are compared to people who do not receive those services, and you see that they're at significant multiples of proportion much more likely to be competitively employed than people who receive other kinds of services. We also know that information and referral services, and this speaks to the issue of the resources that people are seeking in the community, but receiving information and referrals to other agencies within the community is a very powerful vocational rehabilitation intervention as well. So we know the characteristics of people with TBI who are more and less likely to obtain employment. We know the types of services that seem to benefit them the most, and that's the other part of Project Career, which we'll talk about next, having to do with the access to cognitive support technology to support their academic pursuits, and then the intensive vocational case management, including these tried and tested vocational rehabilitation services that we know propel people forward in their career pursuits. So in terms of the Project Career Intervention, as I mentioned, this is developed and this is implemented by technology and employment coordinators at the three implementation sites at the three universities. Deborah Minton at Kent State University, Elaine Sampson at West Virginia University, and Amanda Nardone at Boston University are truly the heart and soul of our Project Career. They each manage a caseload of right now somewhere around 40 students each who have experienced traumatic brain injuries and meet our selection criteria that I mentioned before in 2- and 4-year colleges and universities, and have a vocational goal in their chosen field following graduation. And these ladies work directly with our students in regular, both face-to-face and electronic contacts, and serve their needs very intensively. Our project really provides a kind of a menu of services where we do a comprehensive individualized assessment. That's the matching person and technology approach, developed and advanced by Dr. Marcia Shearer at the University of Rochester, one of our project consultants. And Dr. Shearer's assessment approach involves an appraisal of the student's specific cognitive limitations, where those areas of cognitive difficulty lie in the person's own personal and social functioning, and then identifying specific solutions to those cognitive limitations through the platform of an iPad. We provide each participating student with an iPad 2. That's the current version of the tablet computer that we use. And each student, based on the assessment of their cognitive issues that they're experiencing in those specific areas of cognition, tests and implements, with the assistance of the Technology and Employment Coordinator, a customized configuration of commercially and publicly available apps or applications for the iPad. So if someone has difficulty with executive functioning and, let's say, social cognition, the Technology and Employment Coordinator at the site where the student resides, they work together, to develop apps that address those particular areas of functioning. So study skills and organizational apps to address executive functioning difficulties, memory aids, memory enhancements, things if your issues have to do with memory, social skills and social judgment apps that can help with social cognition, etc. And what we find is as students are using the apps not only to compensate for their cognitive limitations, and again, the issue here is compensation. We are not for their cognitive limitations. We're not making people's brains function any more effectively. We're not building their abilities to remember things without the advent of technology. We are simply providing a technology solution to help them compensate for those limitations that are attendant to their brain injuries. That's a very important point to make right from the beginning. What we find is students also start using the iPads and apps for many other things. They start connecting more than they were with social media. They're increasing levels of social capital, things of that nature. They're using their iPads in particular and using the internet through career building programs to apply for jobs, to get their resumes in order, to connect with people in their chosen fields and doing professional networking and those kinds of things. So it's not just that they're enhancing their cognitive compensatory skills and improving their academic performance, and I'll show you in a minute that there's some evidence that that's taking place. They're also using the computer for many other things to access more effectively their communities and employment resources for the time after graduation. So we're very encouraged by that, and it's exactly what we had in mind. So that's the cognitive support technology process. And then the other part, of course, is the intensive individualized case management, where we are not reinventing the wheel, not by any stretch of the imagination. We are providing tried and true vocational interventions that have been proven for years and years by our colleagues and mentors like Dr. Wayman here at VCU, Dr. Brian McMahon, Dr. Rick Ressler, and many, many others who have demonstrated over and over the value of focused, individualized employment supports to promote employment for people with even the most significant disabilities. And so we apply those same principles, paid internships, summer and part-time employment in your chosen field. Our position is if you got to be working your way through school anyway, which most of our students do, why not get a line on your resume? Why not work in your chosen field while you're at it? And students we find resonating with this very much. Remember earlier I said that students with TBI are less likely to be employed in the first place and less likely to be working in their chosen fields while in school than their non-disabled counterparts. So this is really helping to narrow the gap in professional experience that students with TBI experience in comparison to their non-disabled peers. So we're looking to equalize those opportunities, level the playing field through experience. Every student in Project Career who wishes to have a professional mentor is provided with one, and some of these mentors engage with the students in person and in physical space. Sometimes they engage virtually using the technology that we introduce as part of the project. We provide job development and placement assistance. We interface with the state voc rehab program. If the student is a state VR client, we interface with the Veterans Administration or VA. If the person is a veteran and a VA client seeking vocational services as well. So, but what we offer, we think, as much as anything else, is the intensity of the case management services and the follow along. That really helps where students can come to our techs, we call them technology and employment coordinators, for academic guidance and assistance, connecting with their instructors and with resources on campus, but also the vocational follow along. And rather than waiting till you finish your degree and then initiating your career search, we think it's best to begin that process all at once. So you're enhancing your own academic performance through the use of cognitive support technology, but you're also beginning your new or continued career pursuits while you're in school. If you wait until the end and wait till graduation, you're already behind the curve, if you will, with students who have been preparing for their careers all along. So we strongly encourage students to get involved in career preparatory activities. We help students develop resumes, interview skills training, job seeking skills training, where students are able to go and identify those job leads on their own. We encourage them to do it. Where they're not, we help them to identify job leads and connect with local resources that we have through employers who would be amenable to providing an opportunity to a highly qualified and well-educated student. Reasonable accommodations. I mentioned that one of our partners in the project is West Virginia University and the Job Accommodation Network. The Job Accommodation Network needs no introduction to anyone who's familiar with vocational rehabilitation or the employment of people with disabilities. So our project career students have access to JAN's website and technical assistance services and JAN accommodation consultants. So our students don't have any difficulty with identifying and arranging workplace accommodations. They also look at ways that they can utilize the apps and the iPad, how they use them in their academic programs. Sometimes transfers, the idea of technology transfers to accommodations in the workplace. So we encourage students to consider that as well. And that's the individualized vocational case management piece. And in combination, taken together, the cognitive support technology, the individualized case management comes together. We had hoped to promote increased academic performance, to enhance prospects for retention, because we know the longer people stay in school, the better off they are, the more likely they are to graduate, and the more likely they are to be employed, and also then to start to see improvements in the employment rate after graduation for these students. We'll take a look now as to whether we're realizing those intended promises of this particular project, and we're very pleased with the outcomes that we've achieved so far. So let me tell you a little bit about our students to date. We have 124 students who have participated in the project so far. 58% of these students are male. That's pretty consistent with the demographic of people with TBI. The majority of people who sustain TBIs nationwide are males. You can see that 84% of our students to date are Caucasian, with other racial and ethnic backgrounds being represented in the remaining 16% of students. Have an average age of about 26 years, so they're kind of traditional college age and maybe a little bit older. 26.6% of our students are military veterans. I think I said earlier that about a third of our students are veterans. Actually, it's about a quarter. So you see that. At the time of enrollment in Project Career, the average GPA of our students is about 2.6. They enroll in our project at any point in their undergraduate degree program, some as freshmen, some as seniors. They have a GPA of 2.6 at the time of enrollment and a GPA of 3.25 at the time of exit from Project Career. So this is more than half of a grade point difference. We're very proud of that, and very proud of our students who work so diligently and using the cognitive support technology to their decided academic advantage. So we're happy to see that as well. We asked students when they enrolled in the program to evaluate the severity of their TBI at the time of injury. TBI is classified clinically according in three categories: mild, moderate, and severe. And anyone who has a brain injury knows which category their injury fell into at the time. We use that as a gross but non-overlapping classification for injuries. And we expected our Project Career students to be dealing primarily with mild and moderate injuries, because we thought that people with the most severe injuries probably wouldn't be coming to college. Well, come to find out, folks, 53% of our current students describe their TBIs as severe, meaning that they were in comas for significant periods of time and dealing with significant cognitive limitations, as well as other multi-systemic effects, physical disabilities, and sensory impairments and things of that nature. So students are coming to us with more significant disabilities than we perhaps anticipated at the beginning of the project. And I think the outcomes that we have achieved so far really speak to the power of the cognitive support technology model. They speak to the tremendous passion and dedication of our technology and employment coordinators. And I think they speak to the resilience of students who of these students who, the majority of them having severe TBIs, who come to college and work hard and are throwing themselves entirely into their academic studies and their new career pursuits. So we see the power of the technology, the intervention itself delivered by the technology and employment coordinators, who are simply excellent, and the resiliency and strength and courage of our students to come back after an injury and persevere and pursue their goals. So we're very proud of them for all the work that they do, and it looks like it's achieving outcomes, particularly in the academic side, and more soon on some other outcomes that you'll see why we're so very proud of our students and what they've achieved. We're also very proud of the fact that only 12 students in this project have withdrawn from their academic programs over the 4 years. So that's around a 9% attrition rate, which compares very favorably to dropout rates for students with disabilities, for sure, in higher education, but also students without disabilities. So the general dropout rate for students with and without disabilities is much higher than the dropout rate for our students. And remember, I told you earlier that students with TBI have significantly higher dropout rates without an intervention like this than students with other kinds of disabilities, and in comparison to students with no disabilities at all. So over 4 years, a less than 10% rate of attrition also tells us something about the persistence of our students, but also the potential value of this intervention and the benefit, I think, of the intensive case management services that we provide. It's helping students to stay in school. If they stay in school, they're more likely to graduate, and if they're more likely to graduate, they're more likely to be employed. Let's take a look now at some of the other outcomes that our students have experienced. We conduct follow-up surveys with our students at 6 and 12-month intervals. So every 6 months, 6, 12, and then beyond that, every 6 months, we follow students after graduation for 1 year and provide any services they need in linking to their career fields following graduation. So let's look at some of the outcomes that we've observed from our students compared to what they reported to us coming in at the beginning. So this is always comparing them to their baseline status at a time of enrollment in Project Career. We find that students, as we mentioned, have higher grades. They certainly have very high rates of retention in their academic programs. We're very proud of that. But we see students increase significantly their proficiency and conversance with general use technology, the amount of time they use technology in their daily lives in general, as well as cognitive support. They feel more confident in the use of iPads and apps as a means of accommodating their cognitive limitations. They are significantly more strongly decided about their career goals and career decision making. We see those changes being significant over time. They have more friends and social contacts, that is social capital, on campus than they did at the time of enrollment. Increased levels of life satisfaction, so general quality of life indices, they tell us, has improved from that point forward. A much higher rate of employment seeking behavior and job seeking skills training. So all the career preparatory activities that we expected students to engage in, they are doing that. So they're more familiar and comfortable with the use of technology, more knowledgeable about cognitive support technologies and ways to accommodate their disabilities, greater access to community resources, greater social capital while they're on campus. We talked about the academic performance as well, and a greater sense of psychological well-being and life satisfaction. So we're seeing outcomes really come up off of baseline in all of these areas, frankly, to a greater extent than we would have expected at the beginning of the project. I think this speaks to just the need for the kinds of services that we're providing here at Project Career, but also, I can't say enough, the abilities of students to adjust and adapt, and the ability of people to overcome significant disabilities as they move forward and their goals. So the pursuit of their goals and the drive to succeed and contribute to society is more powerful than any limitation associated with their disabilities. And we're very pleased to see that, and we're very proud of our students for their hard work and effort that it has taken them to reach this level of success. We've had 34 students graduate from their academic programs during the course of this project. 30 of the 34 are currently employed for pay. 3 of them are not employed, but they are pursuing further education, including graduate school. One of the students is not employed for pay or attending graduate school, but she is providing full-time elder care to a family member. So we have 34 students in the project, all of them engaged in productive activity following graduation, which translates, the way we do the math, to a 100% rate of meaningful and productive activity following graduation. Remember, the employment rate for people with TBI 1 year after injury is only 31% from the study that I cited before. So here we have 30 out of 34 employed, 3 of the 34 are going into graduate. So 33 out of 34 are either employed or in graduate school. Interestingly, 8 of the 30 students who are employed are also pursuing further education, including graduate school. So 8 of them are doing both. And the remaining student is chosen to stay out of the workforce while providing care to an elderly loved one. So this is where we believe the real action is when you combine the cognitive support technology intervention and the vocational case management. If we can get students to persist in their degree programs to the point of graduation, and we're having a significant impact on retention rates, the time they graduate, what we can say is with 100% assurance so far at least, that if you graduate, you're going to be doing some meaningful and productive activity after graduation, either in employment, in grad school, or other activities. And so this is, again, we still have 90 other students that we're wanting to follow up, and we look forward to seeing what their results are at the point of graduation. But we're very proud of this of the post-graduation follow-ups that our students are experiencing so far. And again, I want to thank all of my colleagues in Project Career, and particularly our technology and employment coordinators, for their excellent and relentless work in developing and refining this intervention and assisting our students to achieve their goals and realize their vocational dreams. We also want to talk with you briefly about our STAR portal. This is an electronic repository of information on traumatic brain injury, on higher education, on technology. This is free and open to the public and does not require you to be registered with Project Career in any way at all. This STAR portal and it's linked to it on the web page that you can follow along. If you'd like the link, we'd love to have you visit us and tell us what you think. Is housed at West Virginia University through the Job Accommodation Network. It's a joint endeavor of JAN, Job Accommodation Network, and Project Career. And regardless of what happens with the Project Career grant after year 5, this STAR portal will continue as an ongoing project of JAN. So this will, as our project may change, as we seek other funding, things of that nature, this will be a living and ongoing product that people can access. And these can be students, these can be disability advocates, rehabilitation and other service professionals, employers, healthcare providers, literally anybody who's interested in traumatic brain injury, higher education, employment, and assistive technology can access these resources with great links to other resources that are available as well. And this is really as our main dissemination platform, in addition to several publications that we have also listed on the webpage. This is our primary dissemination vehicle for bringing all of these resources together with information on the matching person and technology intervention and how it can be implemented, and then links, of course, to Job Accommodation Network resources, which are vast and extensive, as I'm sure you all know. Well, folks, that's about all I have to say about Project Career, at least for now. I bid you good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, whichever the case may be, wherever you are. I want to again thank the folks at VCU and the Center on Transition Innovations for the opportunity to conduct this webcast. I want to acknowledge and thank my colleagues in Project Career from JBS International, from West Virginia University, from Boston University, and from Kent State for all of their efforts. We have worked very hard on this project and we're very proud of it, but we've had a lot of fun and we've become lifelong friends and colleagues, and that's really what this ought to be all about. And most especially, we want to acknowledge and applaud our students, 124 of them who are pursuing higher education, seeking to advance their careers, and working ever so hard to realize their goals. There's some evidence that this project is helping them along in that way, and if we can help in some small way in doing that, that's really what it's all about. And we're just very grateful to have the opportunity to be involved and to get to know these 124 folks who are doing really incredible things. So it's our pleasure and it's my privilege to be a part of this project, and I thank you for your time and attention today.